From golden fields of barley to the cold glass of beer in your hand, there's a fascinating journey that most people never see. At the heart of every pint is one crucial ingredient: malt. And malt begins its life in a process that's hundreds of years old, called malting. In this video, we'll break down each step of the malting process, from raw barley kernel to the finished malt ready for brewing. Everything begins with the barley kernel, a small but mighty grain packed with potential. The kernel contains starches, proteins, and enzymes. But raw barley isn't yet usable in brewing. It must be coaxed into transformation through a controlled germination process that unlocks its inner potential. The barley kernel consists of two main structures, the embryo and the endosperm. The proximal end of the barley grain contains the embryo, which occupies less than a third of the total volume of the kernel. It contains the acrospire, which develops into the new plant, and rootlet that becomes the new root. At the distal end of the barley corn is the endosperm. It contains cells packed mostly with starch and some protein needed by the growing seed. The whole kernel is protected by the husk on the outside. Inside the husk are the pericarp, testa, and the aleurone layer. When the aleurone layer hydrates, it produces enzymes that break down the endosperm starches, which are used as food during plant growth. Before malting begins, the barley must be thoroughly cleaned and graded. This step removes dust, stones, weed seeds, and broken kernels. Only high-quality uniform grains proceed, ensuring consistent malting. Barley is also graded by kernel size. Plump kernels are used in the malting process. Cleaning and grading are typically done using a set of sieves. Next up is steeping, the first true phase of malting. After cleaning and sizing, the barley is ready for malting. Steeping is the most critical step of the malting process. During this phase, the barley is soaked in water, which initiates the growth process. When barley is soaked in water, some of it enters the seed through the micropylar region. This water then hydrates the embryo and aleurone. It moves slowly through the seed from the proximal to the distal end, but more quickly along the dorsal edge. Hydration begins at the embryo, extends through the scutellum, and reaches the aleurone layer. The endosperm is hydrated starting from the outer edges and progressing toward the center. The water moves relatively slowly through the endosperm, so the seed is only fully hydrated after soaking. The yellow circle is the last area to become hydrated. It is very important to remove dirt and other impurities from the grain at the start of steeping. Dust, various microorganisms, and foreign materials are washed away from the grain by the overflow of excess steep water. The initial water also leaches some husk components that may impede germination. Agitating the barley at the start of steeping also helps with cleaning the grain. The steeping process consists of several alternating wet cycles where grain is submerged under water, and dry cycles, also known as air rest periods, where the water is drained from the grain. The exact duration of each wet and dry cycle and the temperatures applied are customized for each barley variety and crop year, depending on the water sensitivity, protein content, and other important parameters of the grain. Next, we'll look at a typical steeping schedule. This schedule consists of 3 wet cycles, with 2 air rest periods in between. The temperatures usually range from 12 to 20 degrees Celsius or 54 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and the total duration typically lasts between 26 and 50 hours. Adequate supply of water and oxygen, as well as the removal of CO2, is critical for good water uptake and even moisture distribution throughout the barley kernel to achieve homogeneous malt modification. It is therefore important to provide adequate dissolved oxygen supply during wet cycles by bubbling compressed air through steep water, and to remove CO2 from the steep tank during air rest periods. A lack of oxygen at any stage will stop the growth and enzyme production. During steeping, the barley's moisture content increases from around 12% to approximately 45%. By the end of the process, more than 95% of the barley kernels should show clear signs of chitting. At this point, the barley is ready to be transferred to the germination vessel. With water and oxygen, the barley begins to sprout. This is germination. During this stage, the grains are kept in cool, humid conditions while they grow tiny shoots. Germination is the second processing step in malting. Barley growth, which was initiated during steeping, is continued throughout this stage. Once hydrated, the embryo and scutellum begin to produce gibberellic acid, a plant hormone that triggers various processes within the seed. Specifically, it signals the production of enzymes necessary for seed growth. As the seed hydrates, the gibberellic acid moves to the dorsal side and then towards the distal end. Enzyme production follows this movement, resulting in an asymmetric growth pattern. The last area to be affected by the enzymes is near the distal end on the ventral side, which also corresponds to the final region to be hydrated. The grain embryo development can be witnessed by the rootlets' growth and increase in length of the acrospire or shoot. The moisture content of the barley is also monitored and carefully controlled during this process. The objective of germination is to modify the barley grain through enzyme development, while minimizing malting loss by controlling the growth of acrospires. By the end of this stage, acrospires should reach between 3/4 and the full length of the kernel. If left unchecked, the enzymes would break down the entire barley kernel reserves and convert them into vegetative material of a new barley plant. The maltsters are interested in preserving the enzymes and the bulk of the barley kernel, which would later be used by the brewers as a source of carbohydrate extract. This is achieved by carefully controlling the conditions during germination. Temperature is maintained between 14 and 20 degrees Celsius, or 58 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, while humidified air is continuously blown from below the false bottom through the grain bed. Germinating barley is also periodically humidified by water jets and gently revolved by turners to prevent matting of the rootlets. Barley moisture content is kept at above 40% throughout the process. After 4 to 5 days of germination, the green malt is ready for kilning. Once germination has reached its peak, it's time to halt the process, and that's where kilning comes in. Kilning dries the green malt using carefully controlled heat. This stops growth while preserving the enzymes developed during germination. Kilning is the final stage of the malting process. It takes 24 to 48 hours depending on the malt type and the equipment used. The kilning process stops grain germination, preserves the necessary enzymes for brewing, and produces a stable product with 3 to 5% moisture that can be stored for months. Aroma, flavor, and color are also developed during kilning, tailored to the specific malt type. All of this is achieved by passing heated air, typically between 55 and 85 degrees Celsius or higher, through the grain bed. This graph represents a typical kilning process. The blue line depicts the relative humidity of the air exiting the kiln. The red line indicates the temperature of the air entering the kilning vessel, while the orange line represents the temperature of the air as it leaves the kiln. The kilning process starts with the free drying phase, during which surface moisture and loosely bound moisture are removed. The drying rate primarily depends on the air volume. This is followed by the forced drying phase, which requires an increased air temperature to remove bound moisture. The curing phase is when most color and flavor compounds are formed, while the cooling phase is the final step where the grain temperature is reduced. After kilning, the malt is no longer sprouting, but it's not quite ready yet. Rootlets are removed and often recycled for animal feed. At this point, the malt may be bagged and transferred to malt storage. Different temperatures and durations, especially during the kilning phase, create different malt styles. Pale malt, caramel malt, and roasted malt all originate from this stage. And yes, the toasty, biscuit, and coffee-like aromas, they all begin here. Malt is one of the basic raw materials in brewing. It provides most of the extract and contributes to the beer's body, flavor, and color. There are many different types of malt, and malt classification can sometimes be a bit confusing. It can be based on how the malts were produced, the raw materials used, or the properties of the final product. To keep things relatively simple, we will discuss 3 types of malt: base malts, caramel and crystal malts, and roasted malts. As the name suggests, base malts make up most of the total malt weight, up to 100% in fact. After steeping in germination, they are kilned using low to moderate final kilning temperatures. Consequently, these malts are rich in enzymes and serve as the major source of brewer's extract. The flavor impact of base malts can generally be described as low. Pilsner malts, or lager malts, are produced from plump 2-row barley with low protein content. They are steeped to just over 40% moisture, undergo cool germination, and are kilned at temperatures above 80 degrees Celsius or 175 degrees Fahrenheit. These malts are low in color, 1 to 2 lovibond, with a light yellow hue and very mild flavors, such as grainy, bready, or even a slight DMS or canned corn flavor. They are primarily used in the production of various lagers and Kolsch. Although they are not made from barley, wheat malts share some similar characteristics and are mostly used in the production of German Hefeweizens. Next, we have the so-called colored base malts. They are produced from fully modified green malts. and the final kilning temperatures range from 85 to 115 degrees Celsius or 185 to 240 degrees Fahrenheit. It is worth mentioning that as the kilning temperatures increase, the enzyme content of the malt decreases while both the color and flavor increase. These malts also contribute more body and mouthfeel to the final beer. Pale ale malts are produced from the best two-row barley with very low protein content. Kilning temperatures of 90 to 95 degrees Celsius or 194 to 203 degrees Fahrenheit remove any grassy notes. The color is 2 to 3 Lovibond. They are characterized by malty and biscuit flavors with slight toffee notes. These malts are used in the production of classic English ales. Mild malts are produced from the same barley as pale ale malts, but the final kilning temperatures range from 110 to 120 degrees Celsius, or 230 to 248 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the color is up to 3 to 3.5 Lovibond, and the malt has a rich, nutty, toffee, and caramel flavor. It is used in the production of British top-fermented cask ales. Vienna malts are produced from two-row barley, with slightly higher protein content than Pilsner malts. The malt is well modified at slightly higher germination temperatures and kilned at 90 degrees Celsius, or around 195 degrees Fahrenheit. The color ranges from 2.4 to 4.3 Lovibond. The malt has a nutty and toffee flavor and is used in the production of European golden lagers. Munich malts can be produced from the same barley as Vienna malts, but are slightly over-modified. The final kilning temperatures range from 100 to 105 degrees Celsius, or 212 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit. The malt color ranges from 3 to 5 Lovibond. They are characterized by rich, nutty aromas and flavors and are used for brewing strong, full-bodied, and somewhat darker lagers. Base malts, also known as standard processed malts, are produced through three basic processing operations in malting: steeping, germination, and kilning. Unlike base malts, caramel and crystal malts do not go through the kilning process. Instead, they are stewed in roasting drums. Roasted malts, on the other hand, are roasted in drum roasters after going through the kilning process. A drum roaster is a relatively small machine that contains a rotating drum and a cooling tray. It is designed to handle small batches, typically up to 3,000 kilograms, or approximately 6,000 pounds. The objective of roasting is to develop unique colors, flavors, and aromas through intense Maillard and caramelization reactions at high temperatures, during processing times which are typically between 2 and 4 hours. Caramel and crystal malts are used to give beer increased color depth, emphasize malt character, and improve body and mouthfeel. These malts do not go through the kilning process, but are instead stewed in a roasting drum. After germination, well-modified malt with about 48% moisture is transferred into a roaster, where it is kept at 60 to 70 degrees Celsius for 60 to 120 minutes. During this time, the enzymes break down starch into sugars, which are then caramelized inside the malt kernel. Depending on the time and temperature, this process can be intensified or reduced. Crystal malts undergo a complete transformation of starch into sugar, completely replacing the endosperm with sweet liquid. At the end of roasting, the inside of the kernel is fully crystallized, giving it a shiny appearance. Caramel and crystal malts are typically used at a rate of 5 to 15% in the mash due to their intense flavors and lack of enzymes. Lighter malts impart a toasty sweetness, while darker malts develop a more bitter flavor. Roasted malts are used to give beer dark color and specific flavors. Since burnt flavors are only desirable in stouts, controlled amount of water can be sprayed during roasting to prevent roasted flavor development. Roasted malts with more smooth flavor can be produced from dehusked barley. Unlike caramel and crystal malts, roasted malts go through the kilning process first before being transferred into the roasting drum. The roasting process takes about 60 to 90 minutes at temperatures between 180 and 220 degrees Celsius. Roasted malts with a color between 150 and 225 lovibond are sold as coffee malts, while chocolate malts typically range from 300 to 600 lovibond. Roasted malts impart coffee, caramel, and a slight burnt flavor, and they are used in the production of stouts, porters, and other beers, where they make up between 1 and 5% of the total grist. The malting process turns raw barley into a brewer's dream, transforming it from a starchy seed into a flavorful, enzyme-rich powerhouse. Malt provides the sugar that becomes alcohol, the color of the beer, and much of its body and flavor. So next time you raise a glass, take a moment to thank the malt and the careful process behind it.